So some of them, they just go straight to the next part, kind of, it goes in this downward direction. But for some of them, you can have them go backwards to a previous scene, or you can have them skip to a specific scene, or you can just do all of these different follow actions for the different scenes. So I incorporated some of that, and you can have different percent chances of something doing, one action versus another action. It has maybe a 60% chance of going to the next scene and a 40% chance of going to the one previous. So that's kind of where I set up all of my loops and stuff. And it's a loop-based composition. That's why I called it cycles. And it takes a lot of cues from generative music. I've been using a lot of randomness in my music lately to kind of just generate interesting melodies. There's a piano track, which you'll hear later on, that is basically generating random chords within a scale that kind of goes along with what I'm playing. And the actual data from the module is going into a MIDI track that has a drum track on it, a drum rack. I used to actually have the sounds playing in this, but there's too much latency, so I muted it. But the sounds are still controlling the other sounds that are happening in the track. So you can see I'm using things like envelope followers. So every time I hit the snare, for example, every time I hit the kick, the drive of this sound like spikes and then comes back down. And then there's also MIDI expression controls in Ableton. So when I hit another drum, it'll increase the sort of maximum velocity. I used a lot of random velocities in here, but it can kind of increase the range of it depending on how hard I hit the drum. So that's kind of the way that you can program these sounds to change and respond to what you're playing based on just simple MIDI data. It's relatively straightforward, but I haven't seen a lot of people do it with this hybrid drum setup. And that kind of, to bring it back around to the title of what I'm doing and kind of the final thing I talk about in my paper, I kind of thought of this term responsive music when I was coming up with this project. And what it really refers to, a lot of hybrid drummers out there, again, it's very much based on playback, and there are people out there, very, very talented musicians, who have played entire songs just using a single drum kit through this sort of Ableton routing and just using MIDI data to trigger all these different sounds so the song fully is entrained with what they're playing. I was kind of trying to go with a different approach of having a sort of mostly composed piece with a little bit of unpredictability in terms of how it progresses, but one that responds in more subtle ways to what I'm playing. So I'm kind of just improvising over this set of loops. And I'm not really controlling anything directly. There are certain little synth sounds and glitchy sounds that are triggered from the triggers, but most of the work is being done through parameter control, through those expression controls and those envelope followers. So kind of how I defined responsive music in my paper, it's not about playing the sounds yourself. It's not about controlling all of the sounds. In relation to an individual performer, you have to have this sort of musical environment that's not directly controlled by you. So if you're playing in a band, for example, that would be a type of responsive music because the other musicians have the option to play when you're not playing. You're not controlling what they do directly. But they do respond in subtle ways, even subconscious ways, to further entrain with what you're playing. And it's particularly apparent, I think, being a drummer, because you're kind of the backbone of what's going on around you, and everyone else is kind of entraining to you like that. And in this project, that musical environment is just this Ableton project. I'm essentially building my own static musical environment that responds dynamically to what I'm playing. So it's kind of, I think, just a different way of approaching, live performance and electronics, not trying to play everything myself, but trying to play with this sort of electronic band that I've created that is, playing around me. And I'm playing with that. I'm having this musical conversation with these sounds that are going on. So yeah, that is pretty much it for me. Do we do questions after this, or do we just go? I don't know really how this works. If anyone has questions, let me know. But yeah, cool. All right, thank you guys. I guess I'll leave this up for now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joshua. I'm a fifth-year computer science and music tech major, and this is my presentation. So my topic is exploring the combination of electronic and orchestral music in the game Punishing Gray Raven. So here's my main motivation. I like to compose, and I play a lot of video games, and this includes games like Punishing Gray Raven, or PGR, Arknights, and Girls Frontline 2. And I noticed in a lot of these games, they have really unique battle music, and that's mostly due to its setting, which is it exists in a futuristic dystopian world where there's like a lot of fighting and a lot of violence. So as a result, the music will have electronic and orchestral like elements to it, and then they happen to also put in a lot of choir into it, and it's very epic and cool. So for my project, I have two parts to it. Part one is analysis. So in the analysis, I do a deep dive into a few tracks from the game of Punishing Gray Raven. So I look into instrumentation, forms, and technique. And then in part two, I attempt to create my own version, or like I try to replicate the sound with my own track. So this is how I did my analysis. I gathered a few reference pieces from the studio, which is called Vanguard Sound Studio. And this studio specializes in EDM, and they mostly do things in the genre of uplifting trance, and they tend to like to add orchestra and choir. So the first piece I analyzed was called Moonlit Occultation. This is the soundtrack for Chapter 3 of the game Punishing Gray Raven. And what I did was I mapped out every element, like the instruments and the patterns inside of it. And then I also, on the bottom, you can see that I put the energy level so I could look at how it's building up energy and structuring all of its elements. So in this piece, it includes orchestra, choir, EDM, melodic dubstep, and it's split into two phases because there are two phases of the battle sequence. So the first phase is the ambient rhythmic buildup, and then phase two is the cinematic battle sequence. So there were two other tracks that I also analyzed, though to a lesser extent, which is Hikari and Narwhal. These are two of the most viewed tracks on Vanguard Sound Studio's YouTube channel, so that's why I chose those. And yeah. So putting it all together. So what I noticed about the instrumentation and the roles is that you have these things, you have melody, harmony, rhythmic support, ornamentation, color, and then percussion. So electronic and orchestral sounds, they have their own respective elements to them. So electronic, you have like stuff like the lead synth, solo voice, pads, sustain, blah, blah, blah. And then orchestral, you probably already know about what's in an orchestra. Just violin, woodwinds, choir, strings, and you can have piano, and you have like toms and cymbals as a percussion. So after looking at all three of these songs, I noticed something about the energy. So the form is really common. You just have this build-up that goes upwards a little bit, and then it goes down, and then it goes back up to the drop, and then there's like a slight break, and then you go back to the loop. So probably something more interesting is that I noticed there's an energy hierarchy. So in EDM, you like to build up, and then you have this structure of build up, and then rest, and then build up again into drop. So this is especially important if you want to do stuff for orchestral and EDM. So if you want to like combine orchestral stuff, you have to know that some instruments convey more intensity than others. So you have to order your instruments correctly. So in the main melody, you would have like solo wind is below solo voice, and then you go into choir, and then you go into full brass and choir combo. And if you want to, when you're looking at the harmony, you have synths, violin, piano. They're like more neutral sounds. They hold less precedence over the brass. And then rhythmic support, same thing. And percussion, you have kick, and then into kick plus snare, into toms and cymbals, and then any other combination. So let's go into my creation. So compiling all these things together, we sort of get like this BSS formula. We have instrumentation. You just use the common trance sounds, and then the orchestra, and they like to add solo voice and choir. And then the form, it just like goes up and down. And then you also have to follow this sort of energy hierarchy. So this is the track, but I'm not going to play it because it's going to be played later. Okay, so a few challenges I ran into is since I'm a classically trained composer, it was kind of hard to adapt to the EDM structure of builds and drops. So when you're doing classical stuff, maybe you just group it into like sections, like A, B, or something. And then, but in EDM, you have to do things more slowly. You have to slowly introduce music ideas, build them up, and then drop them. And another challenge was mixing synthetic and organic instruments. So since a lot of synths, they have a lot of potential to mask, and you can basically do whatever you want with the frequency. We have to like go out of our way to specifically think about what frequencies we're using. And then another challenge is making the music hit harder. So since I'm not used to doing EDM, I'm more of like a classical composer, I had to learn how to do a lot of production techniques, like sweeps, risers, followers, that stuff. And what I found most helpful for thinking about how to make a dubstep track is to think about like making a call and response bass of sounds, or a call and response of bass sounds. And oh, you can't play it. Okay, never mind. Yeah. So conclusions. So I learned that orchestral principles still apply even in EDM hybrid contexts. And I learned that balance is maintained by managing instruments and energy flow. And finally, I learned that build-up and contrast are key to impact. And that is all. Thank you.
It's in a folder, I assume. Is there any way I can open this up in Google? Because then it'll actually be able to play the videos. Otherwise, in PDF it doesn't. Let's see. There we go. Although, it does take me away. That's fine. Okay, hello everyone. I'm Josh Tockner, and this is my project on shaping sound through effects pedals. Oh, does not want to go. Little project overview. My study is a study of effects pedals relating to timbre and workflow. So my main research questions are how can timbre and workflow be used to enhance music production, and what benefits do effects pedals provide over plugins? A little background on effects pedals. Effects pedals provided the first way to deliberately transform sounds. Before this, people would scratch up their amps to create distortion, but this gave people a deliberate way of doing so. The first pedal to be mass-produced was the Diarman 601 tremolo, which is in the top right. The tremolo pedal is an effect that creates rhythmic changes in amplitude over time, and this pedal achieves that by passing your guitar signal through an electrolytic fluid, which is shaken by an electric motor, and the displacement of the signal through the fluid is what creates the tremolo effect. Moving on, the golden age of effects pedals began in the 70s and 80s, which introduced a lot of new effects like flangers, choruses, delays, and other digital effects. And a lot of artists would utilize these pedals to define their sounds. Most iconically, Jimi Hendrix shaped their iconic sound through pedals like the Octavia, Fuzzface, and wah. So I think it's important to talk about timbre when we're talking about effects pedals, because effects pedals shape the timbre of our sounds. Timbre can be described as the character or quality of a musical voice, music or voice, distinct from its pitch and intensity. And timbre can be used to discern song structure and musical genre, identify artists, and trigger emotional responses in the listener. I think a great example of an artist effectively using timbre to do these things is High by Slow Pulp, which I'll play a tiny bit of right now.
Protein spilling, bars anabolic.
I just think I'm too high.
Yeah, we get a really nice difference in timbre between the two sections with the acoustic guitar and then the really distorted electric guitar, and that definitely creates an emotional response in the listener. So the main pedal that I decided to research for my project is the Microcosm. This pedal is basically what inspired me to do this project. I've been using it nonstop for the past year and a half. It's a granular effects pedal that utilizes sampling, pitch shifting, delay, and looping techniques, and has 11 effects modes built in. Each of these have 4 preset variations, which we'll go into later, but it also has a built-in reverb, a looper, which is 60 seconds long, and you can layer on top of it, and a MIDI clock if you want to sync it up to your DAW's tempo. I describe the timbre of this pedal as dreamy, cinematic, psychedelic, spacey. It definitely has a very unique vibe to it. Here's a little bit of the demo posted by Hologram Electronics, the people who made the pedal. As you can hear, there's a large range of sounds you can get from this pedal, but it all has a kind of cohesive, dreamy, psychedelic vibe to it. Here are the 4 sections or the 4 categories that the effects are organized into. My favorite of these being the microloop and granule section. The microloops are a layer of short loops played back at various speeds, combined to form new rhythmic phrases and tonal colors. It's a very choppy sound, which is nice in contrast to the granules, which gives you really nice and luscious pads. Fragments of sound create giant atmospheres and subtle textural effects. The glitch and multi-delay, I think I use a little bit less, but they have some really cool effects, like that ARP effect that was being played in the demo. These are my 2 favorite individual effects. We have the mosaic effect, which is in the microloops category. It plays overlapping loops back at multiple different speeds, and the different preset variations basically change the playback speeds, which also changes the pitch of the playback. So for example, the A microloop plays back a normal speed, and then you also get the double speed to layer an octave up harmony on top of it. But in the C preset variation, we only have that double speed, so there's none of the normal octave, and we get that nice shimmery high octave alone. I use that C preset variation a lot in my own music. And then another one of my favorite effects is the haze effect, which is in the granules category. It's a cluster of grains to create a wash sound. And yeah, it's pretty similar where the preset variations will change the playback speed. We'll get double speed grains, and again, in the C preset variation. And we'll get the octave down half speed preset variation and the D preset variation. I really like the way this pedal is intuitively laid out. I think it has become a very important part of my workflow and sound as a music producer, which leads me into workflow. I started using guitar pedals around like a year and a half to 2 years ago, and I think only now I've really started about how it changed my workflow and how that really changed the sound of my music. I think a great parallel for this is how writing on paper, which digitally is very different, and there's the long, the argument of saying that like you will remember more things when you write on paper. There was actually a 2014 study done at the University of Udine in Italy, and it was a study done on master's students where they asked these students to write on this specific topic, both on paper and on computers. And it was a qualitative study. They did an analysis of the content of these papers, and they came to the conclusions that it gives more room for creativity, and handwriting reveals not only the personality, but also the emotions of the writer. I think the same thing could be said for using a lot of physical things like pedals or analog effects. Things that actually make you use your physical sensory stuff. But I think it's another thing that's really, that supports this argument is the 4E cognition theory, which splits cognition into 4 different categories: embodied, embedded, enactive, and extended. The most important for my argument being extended cognition, which states our tools extend our cognitive processes. You could think about this in terms of like a jeweler or a sculptor. Most of their attention is focused on the subject or object they're working with, and they adjust their use of the tool based on the dynamic feedback from the object. If we think about this in terms of pedals, I think having to manually link up pedals and manually actually turn the knobs makes you more cognitive of the decisions you're making and greatly changes how you approach making music. And this leads me to the creative side of my project, which is 2 songs from my EP Freefall that just released, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. The title track, Freefall, was a song I immediately made after purchasing the microcosm. And I think most of the melodic and chordal sounds from the song are sounds from the microcosm. I used 3 of the different effects: mosaic and haze, which I mentioned earlier, another effect, glide, which basically creates like octave glides between the notes you play. And I think the timbre of this song really emphasizes the emotional effect of the song, which is about dissociation and escapism and that kind of stuff. And the other track that I used is Melt, which is a direct result of the divergent workflow of my pedal board. I began the song by just recording acoustic guitar in my room, and then I resampled it out through my pedal board and chopped it up, and that creates a nice distinction between the 2 sections. In the bottom right here, I have, not gonna play, it's fine. You'll hear the song later. And some of my findings are that timbre is an essential element in creating intriguing and memorable music. Workflow and the tools you use have a significant effect on the end product of your music. And effects pedals can provide unique timbres and a beneficial change in workflow for music producers. So yeah, thank you. Here's my works edit.
Josh, how'd you do that? Were you like, we're so far. Hello? Oh, we're so back. Yeah, I got you. Oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, my bad. Hello, I'm Sumant. Today I'm going to be talking about my Capstone project on vocal sampling. So a little bit about me. I'm a producer, engineer. A lot of my time in the music tech program is more focused on like producing and composition rather than anything like CS or engineering focus. So my project is kind of centered around the origins of vocal sampling and how it developed over time, particularly with like a lot of electronic genres that utilized it most. I use 3 case studies from different time periods to focus on that, and I'll do like a brief overview of those in this presentation. And then finally, I had a composition where I tried to include as many of those techniques from the case studies as much as I could. So if we all remember back to music in everyday life, we talked about music concrete, the idea of taking snippets and speech from just like random stuff, manipulating it on tape through like looping, speeding up, slowing down, etc. And as more sampling technology came about, especially in like the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, one example would be the Fairlight CMI. It's a digital synthesizer and kind of just like a DAW built into a sampler. And that's where the term sampling originated from. Here is a quick video that utilizes it.
Over here we have Mummy, the waveform, and it should be up on the keyboard.
Yeah, okay. So there's kind of two sides to this. Where'd my thing go? Oh, that's so cringe. Where you can either essentially manipulate through audio or manipulate through MIDI, like in this video. One genre that chose to do the former was Jamaican dub. This was basically the start of vocal sampling, particularly in any electronic music genre. So dub is essentially just a remix or like a B-side. Reggae was obviously very popular in Jamaica. And all these dub remixes were the engineers and producers just emphasizing how you can take a vocal, manipulate it with like a lot of vocal effects. They used the studio as an instrument through tape manipulation, very heavy spring reverbs and delays. The producer that I chose to analyze in my paper was Scratch Perry, who was one of like the pioneers for this atmospheric vocal sound, and that sort of set up a lot of future electronic genres, particularly in the UK, with genres like garage, dubstep, two-step, house, etc. And that brings me to like late 90s, 2000s, where that built off the grounds that dub music laid out. Here, the artist I chose to focus on was Burial. He was kind of known for having this like haunting, heavy atmospheric vocal. A lot of the samples he used were from like 90s and 2000s R&B. He was more focused on, rather than using like MIDI samplers, manipulating the vocals through like chopping, pitch shifting, stretching, and that in a way also just like created his own songwriting, because he can take snippets of a vocal and try and have like a new lyricism or something rather than the original sample. And this video explains his process very well.
Act like you don't know. We were sitting at home in your mama's living room, 'cause we couldn't be alone. See, your mama knew I was something else. She knew how I felt. Back then we were in school, and that's your favorite. Couldn't be alone. You were loving, holding, kissing. Tell me I'm holding you. Couldn't be alone. Couldn't be alone. Couldn't be alone. Loving you. Couldn't be alone. Couldn't be alone. Couldn't be alone. Kissing you. Tell me I'm alone. Tell me I'm alone. Tell me I'm alone. Holding you.
Cool. So that was kind of like what I was more focused on. I really was very fond of the way you can take a whole a cappella, whole vocal sample, just take the phrases and the melodies that you're attached to and kind of pitch shift it around to make something new. And going off his work, I think another more modern example would be Fred again. What he would do is, or he does, is instead of using acapellas in the sense of like how in the 90s and 2000s a lot of artists on the vinyl recordings would just have the acapella for anyone to use, nowadays we use a lot of stem splitting via AI to isolate vocals, and compared to his predecessors where the sample choice is more in released songs, he chose to take just like random everyday clips, whether it's like a spoken word poem, a voice memo of his friends talking, or one song uses like an Instagram clip. And same sort of process, these vocals are pitch shifted, pushed through like a lot of heavy reverbs and delays, and especially for something like a spoken word poem, you kind of have to like make that a non-melodic sound into a melodic sound via pitch shifting or even melodyne. And then my composition, I was kind of like, how do I explain this without showing it in Ableton? But I'll do it my best I can verbally. So the sample I used was an unused demo from an EP I put out in 2023 called Confluences. It was a song that I made with my two very good friends, Doug Sa and Hong Join. So I never received a proper vocal take from Join. He only just gave me like a voice memo of him singing on the beat. And I was like very eager to work on the song while I was like waiting for him to record it properly and send it to me, which he never did. So what I did was I took the voice memo he sent me and I used an AI stem splitter to just have the vocal. And then we never ended up finishing the song. I don't even know where it is or if I have anything of it to show. But when I was working on this composition, a lot of my workflow is just making an instrumental, and then I'll just search in Ableton vocal or acapella, vox, anything of that sort, and just cycle through samples, see what works best. So I saw that I had the AI stem split vocal from Join, and what I did was I manually chopped it as well as used a MIDI sampler so that I had both techniques. One has because I'm using a MIDI sliced sample, I can perfect the timing and it's perfectly on grid and everything, whereas the other, being an audio, it's more organic, it's off time, which I think stems back to burial sample technique. It's hard for me to explain this without playing the song, but eventually in the bridge I reveal the whole sample, and going back to the whole Jamaican dub sound design, I'm sending that through a lot of delays and reverbs, trying to create an atmosphere as best as I can. And some conclusions. I feel like throughout music technology, the way vocal sampling is done is kind of just influenced by what is available at the time, whether it's tape manipulation or using digital samplers, or nowadays DAWs. I also think the use of AI stem splitting has essentially just made sampling more accessible, whether I'm trying to get a vocal or if I'm focusing on the instrumental, I can take that. However, now AI is getting increasingly good at generating vocals and samples, so that kind of raises the question of what defines a sample. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, where 10 years ago I think vocal sampling was never done via stem splitting. In fact, stem splitting wasn't really a thing back then, and now it's such a new technology that we use every day. How will vocal sampling be done in the future? I think a lot of live performance will be influenced into that, and I'm kind of curious to see if generative AI samples will take over vocal sampling. Yeah, we're excited. Thank you.
What did I?
Just are you going off the slides?
Yeah. Hey, hello. My name is Katrina Sheik, and today I'll be sharing my research on data sonification, particularly for gravitational wave data. So the overall objective for this experiment or project is to explore how astrophysical data can be transformed into a musical composition. And this is done merging both scientific communication with artistic expression, and using parameter mapping to like musical properties such as pitch or rhythm and timbre. So a little bit of background on gravitational waves. They are caused by very large-scale cosmic events such as star collisions or black hole mergers, and they can be detected on Earth. And they're naturally frequency-based, which makes them suitable for sound conversion. And my compositional approach involves both the piano and fixed media, and kind of incorporates live instrumentation with digital work. And there's a plot here that shows like what a typical gravitational waveform actually looks like in terms of the physical parameters on a time scale. And this is from the LIGO event viewer. So sonification is defined as the translation of data into sound. And there are many ways that this can be done, and many applications that involve sonification. NASA has used it for Hubble image data. There are Python tools and like direct translations that exist out there for gravitational wave data. There are also a lot of applications in accessibility because sonification provides an alternative method to experience and understand scientific data without having to actually see it on the graph physically. So, and then there are also applications in music as well that take a lot of scientific concepts, take data, and use that to derive music, melodic material, harmonic material, things like that. And there are a few different techniques that are used. The one that I'll be using is parameter mapping, which is where data attributes are assigned to individual musical elements. There's also direct frequency mapping and also algorithmic modeling, which is generative. So the source for my data is the Gravitational Wave Open Science Center from the LIGO Scientific Collaboration, which is a public repository. I collected a total of 70 gravitational wave events, which includes waveform data, mass values, things like that, and then I completed Fourier analysis in Python in order to extract the frequency content of each wave, and that's part of what I'm using for my mapping. And I wrote a Python script based on Matt Russo's system sounds method that translates the mass, like the total mass of the objects involved in the collision, into time, and then the average frequency of each individual event into pitch. And I have here the general mapping function that I used. So it basically just takes like the minimum to maximum value and then maps it onto a different scale. And what I observed from the frequency-mass relationship is an inverse trend. And so I thought that that would be an interesting thing to explore in a musical context. I converted mass into time over a range of 180 beats. And the frequency I first normalized from 0 to 1, and then mapped that onto a C pentatonic scale using a MIDI mapping function. And then the final exported data I just sent into a MIDI file and then use that as the melodic basis for my electronic composition. So here are the two plots. The one on the left shows the initial data with the total mass on the x-axis and the average frequency on the y-axis, and then the translated data in time and MIDI notes. Okay. So the composition, there are a few different creative choices I made in order to kind of bring out the data in a way that really communicates like what's happening physically. I used, for the higher frequency range, brighter textures, and then the lower frequency range is like a little bit warmer and more percussive, and this is to highlight the inverse relationship between mass and frequency. And the frequency like directly translated gravitational waves that the LIGO repository had are included in the background texture for the digital file as well. And as far as the piano composition, I wanted to create something a little less like defined by like the actual scientific numbers. So I kind of created like a vague like arpeggiated material that suggests the acoustic reference to wave motion without actually being like directly translated. That's it, thank you.
All right, one last go at this, eh, folks? I'm Max. I'm a music technology and recording major, and today I'm going to be talking about my project Quadrivium. So, how did this come about? Well, I was very high in elevation in the Sandia Mountains of Albuquerque, New Mexico, my home. I was reading this book of hokey esoteric mathematics titled Quadrivium, and I got inspired, honestly, mostly by the sacred geometric visuals in the book. So, project goals. I wanted to make a fully mixed, releasable EP. I had access to a studio a lot of the time this year, and I wanted to release some music after college ends, because I haven't released any music currently. And I wanted to integrate aspects of my life story into artist design, kind of constructing a stage persona, because that's like where my musical background comes from. The goal was just to tell a narrative story that integrates specific aspects of mathematics in novel ways, mirroring the Pythagorean idea of quadrivium. And I wanted to introduce my artist persona, who is called Zero. So here's my album cover. It features symbology reminiscent of the cult of the Pythagoreans. So the 4 quadrants are each one part of the quadrivium, which I'll describe in a second. It's split into these 4 quadrants by the Zia, which is the symbol of the Zia tribe and also the state of New Mexico. And the center is a 0, because I'm 0. So for my background research, most of what the Pythagoreans actually, or what Pythagoras actually discovered was pretty unclear. He did not invent or discover the Pythagorean theorem. It was the Babylonians like 1,000 years before. And his followers actually attributed so much to him that it created this infamous sort of question called the Pythagorean question, which is like, who was Pythagoras and what did he actually make? He was a highly secretive philosopher who didn't really write anything down. So there are fables about his theorem and discovery of harmonic scales through like listening to hammers and anvils, but for the most part, it seems that they're all just lore. So the most influential thing Pythagoras actually did was found a cult, which shares his name, the Pythagoreans. And this cult propagated information in his name for centuries, kind of making him into this legendary Greek philosopher, and later reemerged as another cult called the Neo-Pythagoreans in antiquity Europe. So this cult was super dogmatic, and their main thing was they believed in a sort of like divine mathematics, with one notable example of their dogma in the lore being the drowning of Hypapsis. So one of Pythagoras' followers basically discovered irrational numbers, and it freaked Pythagoras' worldview out so much he pushed him off a boat and drowned him. And they believed essentially in the idea of tetractys, which is the original Greek term for what the Romans called quadrivium, which describes a divine mathematical order composed of numerology, geometry, harmony, and cosmology. The quadrivium was the standard academic liberal arts curriculum for hundreds of years throughout antiquity Europe. So the topics that I integrated, basically arithmetically, I wanted to try and make a song that used the Fibonacci sequence. Geometry, I wanted to do something involving triangles. Harmony, I wanted to use fundamental frequency, so like Fourier transformations, which is essentially just breaking down complex sounds into series of sine waves, and then you can multiply those waves back together and get those complex sounds again. And astronomy, I wanted to integrate music of the spheres, which if you actually know what that is, that's a ridiculous conceited thing to say you're gonna do. They basically believed that the planets like played music as they were circulating because, you know, the planets have an orderly motion and they're moving, and harmony is just orderly motion to them. So they thought, oh yeah, the planets are moving in a certain way. They gotta make music up there. So getting into my project, I encountered a lot of design flaws right away. So my first song, I wanted to make a section written in the Pythagorean scale, but it was very hard to transition into that scale. I didn't want to make the whole song in that scale. And it also is just like an antiquated scale that like sounds really unpleasant for the most part. And song 2, I wanted to create a rotating triangular miking setup, which is very hard to do without a lot of money and custom equipment, and there were like serious phasing issues, like with the sounds canceling each other out between mics. So song 3, I wanted to make a vocal out of a reversed Fourier transform, which is very mathematically complex and time consuming. And for the 4th song, again, like I wanted to do music of the spheres, but it's a stupid debunked theory that's very hard to implement. So solutions, I dialed everything back and just tried to get into the music. So the first song uses like a Pythagorean chord in standard regular tuning where it layers. So if you see that picture with all the red on it, those are all sound waves in each tone of the chord. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 13, which that's the Fibonacci sequence. And then for song 2, I bought a $40 plugin that did all the complex miking setup thing for me by simulating it, and it took me like 25 minutes. That's the plugin up there. And then song 3 uses layered sinusoidal synths to construct and deconstruct a complex sound, and the melody mirrors sinusoidal motion. And then song 4 basically uses creative panning and sound design to simulate a sky full of stars. So then onto the artist design part of the project. This is probably the most important part for me. So I wanted to integrate metaphors to connect each topic mathematically, since I kind of chickened out of all the hard math on this one. The first song is called Prototype, and it's about being the first prototype on a new life path. You know, your parents did something completely different, and you're feeling unsure about where you're gonna go and how you're gonna do it. The second song is called Pythagorean, and it's about a love triangle between dreams and vices. The third song is called F-Zero, and it's about wanting to return to fundamental human existence, you know, just sipping tea on your porch. And the fourth song is called Zero Stars Left, and it's about a series of superstars that have failed us. So the album tells a story of a lost, self-hating individual, sick with addiction, who runs away to a faraway city in space, only to discover that the fundamental aspects of life he's been searching for were on the ground the whole time. He learns he must be his own hero. This character is Zero, a musician who learns that he does his best work when he's a backdrop for new stars to shine. He has become the void behind the stars. Did I mention I'm conceited? The goal is to show you can make something beautiful out of the worst, weakest parts of yourself. So who is this character that I keep dancing around? Well, it comes down to shadow work. So psychology describes shadow work as making peace with the part of yourself that you hate. But the shadow is more. It's the scared, hurt little kid. It's the heartbroken young person. It's the part of you that you can't stop running from. But that's the beauty of running. It takes a whole lot of energy. It's exhausting to hurt yourself, to run from yourself, and to close yourself off to others around you. What if you could take that energy and direct it constructively to the heart of music itself? That is the question that Zero asks. The Buddha describes it clearly. Be a light unto yourself. So, for my takeaways, I learned that mathematics, especially geometry, is very hard to map one-to-one to music. They're related, but not entirely linked. I learned that my art flows more naturally through narrative expression than technical experimentation. So that's a quote from Joseph Campbell, a mythologist describing the hero's journey. I learned that experimental miking setups are expensive and time-consuming. And I learned that being flexible and bending rules is an important part of artistic expression, and strict constraints are often prohibitively limiting. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I'm Oscar, and my Capstone project is about how timbre and sound selection impact lyric writing and emotions. So, quick little introduction. What is timbre? Timbre is a sound's unique tone color or character. When you hear people use words like buzzy, hollow, or crisp to describe a sound, that's usually in reference to the sound's timbre. Timbre is how we can hear the same melody played on a flute and a piano, and we're still able to tell that it was played on two different instruments. So for my project, I wanted to find out how and why specific timbres call to mind the emotions that they do, and explore the impact that has on the lyric writing process. Additionally, I was interested in how timbre can be used to create a world or a vibe within a song. So in my background research for this project, I came across some very interesting perspectives on timbre. Professor Elizabeth Van Elferen argues that in and of itself, timbre is not actually a concrete entity, and therefore on its own is actually pretty meaningless. And she compares timbre to a void that we are so anxious to fill that it has importance to us only because we are so desperate to give it meaning. And she compares our perception of this phenomenon to the moment you develop a photo, and that we are so desperate to ascribe importance to timbre because it ultimately is a very ephemeral phenomenon, which falls in line with this philosophical concept called presence that is absence, which basically holds that the noticeable absence of something still implies its presence. However, this other author, Maria Perev-Edenseva, takes issue with the fact that this perspective only really applies to the context of a solitary listener. She uses the example of EDM music, where the repeated use of sounds like rim shots, risers, and respaces have given those sounds specific meanings and connotations within the community. And she compares this to the mycelial networks of fungi, which send signals to each other to communicate. So to explore the validity of these arguments, I composed and wrote lyrics for a 7-song album called Where the Grass Meets the Frost. Some of the major themes of the project include nostalgia, loss, escapism, and hauntology, all of which you're probably relatively familiar with, aside from the last one, which we'll get into on the next slide. So broadly, hauntology is the idea that elements of the past come back to haunt the present. In the context of music, this includes using sounds from the past to evoke a sense of nostalgia or longing. However, in electronic music, it has a more melancholic connotation, as it also references a feeling of stagnation and sort of innovation when it came to technology in the mid-2000s, and ideas about what the future would look like at the time and in the 90s that sort of failed to take shape. So one of my favorite examples of hauntological music is the Caretakers album Everywhere at the End of Time, which uses progressively warped and noisy ballroom music to simulate the progression of dementia. Kind of scary, but kind of cool. The other concept I came across that heavily inspired my album is skeuomorphism, which is when something is designed to simulate its real-world counterpart. So for example, how digital plugins are designed to look like their analog counterparts, how like a rain stick simulates the sound of rain falling. So in the case of my project, my album was winter-themed, so I used arpeggios to symbolize like snow and precipitation, reverb to simulate icy, reflective environments, and I generally tried to pick sounds commonly associated with winter, like bells and other sorts of metallic percussion. And my favorite example from my album that I like to highlight is in my song Portrait of a Portrait. I wanted to simulate going through a black hole. So you can see on the left down there how all the synths are sort of playing together at the start of the song, and then by the end they're all chopped up and rearranged, which is supposed to symbolize like the spaghettification effect of going through a black hole. So after composing the songs and writing the lyrics, I went through and analyzed about 5 to 7 sounds from each song based on their amplitude envelopes, modulation, and effects. I also gave my personal interpretation of each timbre and what that timbre made me think of, such as video games or outer space. And so these are some of the main takeaways from the experience and the analysis. For one, how does timbre influence lyrics and emotions? Based on my personal classifications for these sounds and lyrics that they produced, personal experience and connotation are huge factors. For example, in one of the songs I'm showing later, Bittersweet, I chose a lot of analog sounding synths for the bridge section. And because these sounds have a very nostalgic connotation, they produced a lot of lyrical references to specific childhood memories. But apart from that, there are also definitely some concrete factors we can point to that explain why we perceive the sounds that we do, such as wave shape. Sine waves, for example, purely consist of a fundamental frequency, lack any harmonics, we would never find in nature on its own, which is why when we hear a pure sine tone, we might think of it as sort of being sterile. But if we add some effects and modulation, we can distort the sound, make it more imperfect and more natural. As for how we can use timbre to create a sonic world, skeuomorphism is a great tactic, as it can be used to sonically represent visual or other sensory experiences. And furthermore, I think the biggest takeaway is that being purposeful with the sounds we choose for our compositions is a great way to evoke the feelings that we want from our listeners, which I feel like is a primary goal when we're trying to make music that emotionally resonates with people. For further questions, I talked a lot about timbre, but how do some of the other musical elements come into play here, like melody, harmony, and rhythm, and how do they impact lyrics and emotions? I feel like we know a good amount about melody and harmony, but I think rhythm could be more interesting to find out more on. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening.
How you doing? Sorry, we're going back-to-back timbre in these things, but I definitely have some different findings than Oscar. But my name's Tynan Reynolds, and I would like to talk to you today about my capstone entitled Timbre as a Compositional Tool, Intermodulation, Distortion, and Noise Rock Music. The main contention of my capstone paper is that developments in timbre now inform creative decisions and songwriting choices, and I will understand this through the analysis of my own creative application, a recording project with my band. The main way I aim to understand this is through the intermodulation and harmonic distortion that occurs in analog hardware and the harnessing of these effects for artistry. I want to most importantly understand these effects through spectral analysis of certain guitar parts and compositions on the whole. To begin, I would first like to provide a framework for the ways in which I will be referring to timbre. Everyone in this room maybe knows, but to the layman, timbre is often described as the color of a sound. And while this phrase captures the general idea of timbre, I think it loses how widespread timbre is as a concept. If melody and harmony are answering the questions of what is being played and rhythm answers the question of when it is being played, in that case, timbre answers the very wide question, how it is being played. Timbre is the quality that describes sounds that are distinct from rhythm and pitch in Western tradition, and listeners will sometimes use adjectives that we all know and love, like boomy, wide, thin, squeaky, glassy, or countless others in an attempt to articulate timbre. To the average music listener, timbre can be intangible, or at the very least, a complex and multifaceted musical quality. Frequency information is one of the few ways we have to understand timbre from a dative perspective. Since frequency analysis revolves around the spectral domain and measuring amplitudes of frequencies, one could even argue that amplitude itself is a means of expressing timbre, but this is maybe a discussion for another investigation. More importantly, though, I would like to present an in-depth understanding of intermodulation distortion and its relevance to this project. Distortion is a very prevalent expression of timbre across many different genres, and while this can mean any change of a signal in its processing, for our purposes, we'll refer to the type of distortion that could be synonymous with the effects of overdrive and fuzz in consumer contexts. In other words, distortion that clips a signal to some degree so that more harmonics are produced. Historically, the main research surrounding distortion has revolved around harmonic distortion. The effects of harmonic distortion are easiest to observe in their interaction with sine waves or simple signals. In recent years, it has become easier to observe the effects of intermodulation distortion in analog hardware. While both of these types of distortions are nonlinear, intermodulation distortion employs some indifference tones, which results in harmonics that do not necessarily fit into the naturally occurring harmonic series. These harmonics occur when the two inputted frequencies and their subsequent harmonics are combined or subtracted and appear in the output signal. These tones can sometimes occur below the fundamental frequency of the two inputted frequencies. Suppose for a second that if a 110 Hz tone and a 164 Hz tone were inputted into a nonlinear system that performs intermodulation distortion, the different tones would be created and seen in the output would be below both of the frequencies inputted. Now, when it comes to existing research, Richard Chowanhill's investigation, Seeing the Invisible, New Approaches to the Analysis of Extreme Metal, Chowanhill observes certain metal compositions that utilize intermodulation distortion in their building of a creative message. Chowanhill observes the ways in which guitar amplifiers, especially when combined with further distortion techniques such as pedals or feedbacking, affect the harmonic information and intended harmonic parts of the composition. Chowanhill notices that even just the power chord, two frequencies at a perfect fifth interval inputted into a guitar amplifier, creates combination tones that create strange harmonic effects. The major third and the natural seventh tones become prominent in the signal if you look at the frequency spectrum. These tones drastically affect the harmonic content and subsequent perception of the signal. Effectively, this chord intended to just be a power chord is now major. Even elementary music practitioners are aware of the major chord equals happy and minor chord equals sad binary, which speaks to the effect that harmonic choices have on emotion in listeners. In this case, harmonic choices come from textural decisions, meaning that it is texture alone that is affecting emotion. Chowanhill then begins to explore the ways in which this is utilized by existing compositions in the world of metal music. Even more so, it is the interaction of harmonic voicing and timbre Chowanhill is able to articulate into an understanding of artistry on the song Freezing Moon by Mayhem. Chowanhill says, though the played harmony is conventional and consonant in the introduction of the song and represents a typical tonic chord in the key of E minor, the sounding harmony is quite dissonant due to the harmonics generated by intermodulation and harmonic distortion. The sustain that is afforded by the amplification and the reverb cause the harmony to hang in the air and generate an increasing dense cloud of harmonic dissonance as the chord tones of the minor triad are allowed to ring out freely over one another and generate audible intermodulation distortion. Here we have an instance in which the timbre provided by harmonic and intermodulation distortion present in the signal of the guitars informs perception and emotion. In digital audio effects, Udo Zolzer understands the nonlinearities present in different analog amplifiers so that their effects can be understood in the context of digital audio. In particular, hardware like the Vox AC30 amplifier and other tube guitar amplifiers feature preamplifier stages with triode vacuum tubes. These tubes express nonlinearity in the output current of the anode, which quadratically depends on the input voltage of the gate, as pictured in some of these figures up top here. In other words, the triode will exponentially affect the signal and amplify certain harmonics. And in the case of the triode in the Vox AC30, this means the second harmonic in the harmonic series. Pentode vacuum tubes used in power amp stages of tube amplifiers create odd-numbered and harmonics in the hypothetical output of the spectrums. The relationship between input gate voltage and output current is S-shaped in this case and also nonlinear. Higher output amplitudes and input gate voltages will produce soft clipping and subsequent odd-numbered harmonics. Lower input amplitudes will conversely behave nearly linear in the relationship between input voltages and output currents. Different amplifiers, even of these configurations, feature different distinctions in their circuitry to create differences in sound. For instance, the Mesa Boogie features two cascading preamplification stages, leading to the emphasis of that second harmonic. The Vox AC30 features a Class A configuration of the power amp stage, and this Class A configuration amplifies the entire signal in the power amplifier at all times, leading to an emphasis on those odd harmonics in that power amplifier stage that is enabled. These subtle differences in hardware affect signal differently. It is true that timbre is a signifier of things like genre. It is also safe to assume that timbre is also a major component of artistic vision in the whole. And if it is hardware that affects timbre, then distinctive choices in hardware within a composition are in fact tools for songwriting. When it comes to the creative aspects of this investigation, it is important to revisit the ideas explored by Chowanhill, where choices in timbre inform harmonic and rhythmic possibilities. This concept is common in my own creative project, most notably in the driving instrument of my creative project, which also happens to be the electric guitar. It provides the basis for timbre in which many other instruments such as vocals follow on many of the songs. For instance, take the song Halifax in my creative project. The chord progressions in this piece are by no means original. The strum patterns or rhythms of these chords are almost indiscernible and is mostly meant to be perceived as texture. To understand timbre in this piece, we must first understand what frequencies are being present in the played intended harmony of the rhythm guitar parts. And this will lead to greater understanding to the creative message being put forth. The tonic chord in the verse and chorus, for example, features the following notes and frequencies. pictured above, E sharp 175, G sharp 208, C sharp 278, and E sharp 349. Hypothetically, the sum of different tones from those frequencies alone, and not the harmonics that occur from the fact that they are complex waves in hertz, are 33 hertz, 103 hertz, 174, 70, 141, 71, 383, 453, 524, 486, and 557, and 627, all pictured in the figure. And if we look at the ways in which certain spectral bins in Halifax are affected, both before and after intermodulation distortion, we can see that a lot of these sum and difference tones come up. On the right figure here, you can see that the magnitude increases for certain spectral bins like bin 8 on the right, which features the combination tone F1 and F2. Anything labeled clustering is a result of intermodulation distortion, and anything labeled harmonic is the result of harmonic distortion and the increase in the second harmonic or other harmonics along the series. And if we look at this visually, one can observe the ways in which not only intermodulation distortion and harmonic distortion are both present in this application. The wet signal features far more harmonic information in the high end of the signal and clustering as a result of the sum and difference tones. And the dry signal has a much neater harmonic series, and the roll-off in the amplitude of the harmonics is much more predictable. In summary, timbre was once considered a secondary function of music composition. One can observe the ways in which the means of conveying timbre are limited in traditional music composition. Clearly, in Western notation, the emphasis is on pitch and rhythm. In contemporary music production spaces, however, timbres may be the most important compositional tool. Not only is it often the means in which composers make harmonic and rhythmic choices as observed through mayhem, but timbre itself is now capable of creating a narrative art. In Halifax, one can observe the ways in which certain aspects of sonic density and sonic clarity, as observed in the entire composition, which we'll hear in a sec, serve as a sort of a timbral dominant and a timbral tonic, respectively. Overall, one of the most important factors in this evolution of timbre is the ways in which certain hardware choices are now fundamental compositional choices through harmonic and intermodulation distortion. So my references, thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. Does anyone know presentation view? Nope, not that. Oh, yes. Nope. I can just do it like this if we want to. Well, hello everybody. My name is Jake, and my capstone presentation was on. Oh, you know how. Sorry about this. I thought. Oh, cool. Jesus. Hello everybody. I am a fourth year music tech major, and my capstone project was on live electronic performance. So for my project, I kind of studied the history and common practices of live electronic performance and electronic music creation. I then, for my project, created my own live electronic music setup, and then created a composition and performance based on that setup. So just to start off with like an overview of the history of electronic music, granular synthesis was invented in the 1950s by Dennis Gabor, and I guess the earliest synthesizer would be the theremin in like the 1800s, but synthesizers as we know it, know them, kind of came out in like the 1960s, and we have bands like Silver Apple who toured with their own homemade synthesizer, and Tangerine Dream, which popularized electronic music. In the early days, 1975, Einstein on the Beach was an opera by Philip Glass, which featured synthesizers, which was new for opera music. And then in the 70s and 80s, we have disco and Detroit techno, which are both genres that used sequencers and synthesizers in a live context and in a production context to create electronic music. And then moving on to the 1990s, we have people like Aphex Twin, who was known for creating his own synthesizers, which really revolutionized electronic music and circuit bending and all those things. 2000s artists like Grimes created compositions and performances using looping, vocal pedals, synthesizers, and then later on Ableton Live. 2010s, Flume is another artist who used MIDI triggers to perform electronic music. And then 2010s, more technology, people like Imogen Heap created MIDI-controlled gloves to expressively control synthesis, MIDI, and different parameters for live electronic performance. So for my project, I created an electronic music setup using MIDI and synthesis. So one thing I did was I mapped the granulator in Ableton to a MIDI keyboard. I also mapped the capture function, so I was able to live sample audio from my project into the granulator and then control the grain size, which is how long the grain is, the shape of the grain. I was able to octave shift the sound, and then additionally control reverb, distortion, and filter on the granulator. So the next part of my electronic music setup was live looping. I took inspiration from people who have done it in the past, like Flume and Grimes. So I used a MIDI foot switch along with Ableton Session View, which I hadn't really used before. The sounds I used for my composition came from Serum, which is a digital synthesizer, along with the Roland JX305, which I like because it's a bigger keyboard and it has some unique sounds on it. And I used a foot switch to trigger loops. So if you can see on the right side, that's the session view where you're able to trigger different loops and record audio straight into Ableton for performance. So another part of my setup was giving myself the ability to mute tracks and filter tracks and create different sections of my performance that way. So this is just a picture of my MIDI keyboard, which is labeled with all the different tracks, and when you press it, it essentially will just mute the track. So another part of my composition was working within Ableton to create like glitch effects and audio automation. So I made use of the Shaper plugin a lot for my composition. So the first way I did this was creating like a sidechain effect using the Shaper plugin mapped to the utility gain. And I was able to toggle that on and off with controllers. The second way was mapping the first shaper to the rate of the second shaper, which was routed to the gain, which gave kind of like a glitch effect that I used for the outro. And yeah, so that's basically an overview of the composition and my setup for this project. So in conclusion, my project created a system to create and perform electronic music kind of unique to me. And I think that the way that my composition combined with the setup was unique. And further for this project, I hope to keep integrating more creative and expressive ways to control MIDI, whether that be through motion or other ways, and continue exploring analog synthesis. And yeah, here are my sources. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello. I have a video presentation, so sit back, relax. If you want to hear my practical application, come by the table tomorrow. But oh, that's not it. That's the bio. Do you have the Professor? Do you have the one I? So, no, I had the video that I uploaded to Canvas this morning. No? Hello. Today I'll be discussing the evolution and practical application of spatial audio. Spatial audio is a technology that allows listeners to experience sound in 3 dimensions, mimicking how we naturally hear in the real world. Unlike traditional mono or stereo audio, spatial audio enables sounds to originate from any direction, above, below, beside, in front of, or behind the listener. While the usage of spatial audio has significantly increased across films, video games, virtual reality, and music in recent years, it's important to understand that this technology has deep historical roots. By exploring its evolution, technological advances, and practical applications, we can better understand how spatial audio is transforming our everyday listening experiences. Spatial awareness through sound is actually a fundamental human ability that predates any technology. In prehistoric times, the acoustics of caves were determined by their resonance, with early humans using sound to understand their physical environment. In religious practices from the 16th century, we see early examples of spatial audio techniques. At the Basilica San Marco in Venice, composer Adrian Willard created antiphonal performances using 2 organs and choirs positioned on opposite sides of the basilica, creating echo effects and an immersive experience. The first significant technological applications emerged around 1950 when Pierre Schaeffer produced Symphonie pour un homme seul, using tape recorders and strategically placed speakers to create 3-dimensional sound movement. In 1960, Karl Stockhausen composed Contacte, the first quadraphonic composition using 4 channels with 4 speakers. This allowed sound to travel through a 3-dimensional space, testing listener spatial awareness as sounds came from all directions. Unfortunately, when quadraphonic audio systems became commercially available in 1969, they faced significant challenges. The lack of industry standards for equipment and limited content availability ultimately led to the format's commercial failure. In 1974, Francois Bala introduced the Acousmonium, a specialized speaker system that highlighted specific tones in darkened rooms, creating a unique immersive experience where listeners couldn't visually identify sound sources. The technical evolution of spatial audio has moved through several distinct approaches. First, channel-based systems begin with mono, 1 channel, 1 speaker, progressed to stereo, 2 channels, 2 speakers, and eventually evolved into formats like 5.1 and 7.1 surround sound. The limitation of channel-based audio is that each audio channel is fixed in the mix, providing no flexibility for different playback systems. Object-based audio addressed this limitation by encoding each audio source independently with positional metadata, allowing sounds to exist as objects in 3-dimensional space. This approach is particularly effective in interactive environments like video games, Ambisonics, invented in the 1970s but not commercially adopted until the early 21st century, allows audio to be recorded, mixed, and played back in a 360-degree field. Unlike channel-based systems, ambisonics can be adapted to any speaker setup while maintaining the full spatial field. Binaural audio replicates how our ears naturally perceive sound, creating an immersive three-dimensional experience through ordinary headphones. Wavefield synthesis places virtual sound sources in real space, creating accurate sound fields through numerous loudspeakers. This technique allows listeners to be positioned anywhere in the active sound field while still experiencing the proper localization of sounds. A major turning point came with Dolby Laboratories, founded in 1965. After introducing Dolby noise reduction in the 70s and Dolby Stereo also in 1975, they eventually gained enough traction to eventually develop Dolby Atmos in 2012. Dolby Atmos is an object-based audio technology that places sounds in a three-dimensional space. It combines both object-based and channel-based approaches through objects, discrete audio sources placed anywhere, and beds, traditional channel-based sources, and fixed configurations. The first Atmos experience in cinema was Disney's Brave in 2012, played in specially equipped theaters with ceiling speakers. Today, there are over 7,800 Atmos-equipped theaters worldwide. In music, Atmos gained traction only more recently, with streaming services like Apple Music, Tidal, and Amazon Music HD now offering Atmos tracks. Live venues like the London's Ministry of Sound nightclub have installed Atmos systems with 22 channels and 60 speakers, allowing DJs to play sounds anywhere in the space during live performances. The future of spatial audio is exemplified by the Sphere in Las Vegas, which features 167,000 loudspeaker drivers that can target sound to any of the 17,500 individual seats without audio decay. This revolutionary approach ensures every audience member hears performers clearly with no echo, regardless of the position in their venue. Atmos is even extending to automobiles, with vehicles like the Ludic Air featuring a 21-speaker surround sound system, and Dolby announcing a collaboration with Cinema to further develop automotive audio solutions. For my practical application of spatial audio, I mixed two different audio tracks utilizing the Dolby Atmos Pro Tools renderer, each with a binaural and 5.1 system mix. The first composition features nature's sounds, aiming to transform listeners into different environments, from bees buzzing around their heads to thunderstorms circling closer and closer. This demonstrates how spatial audio can enhance ambient soundscapes for applications like nature documentaries or museum installations. The second piece utilizes stem files from experimental hip-hop band Death Grips, showcasing how spatial audio can enhance everyday music listening. The contrast between these two pieces demonstrates the versatility of spatial audio across different genres and media. When mixing with Atmos, I had to carefully balance musical clarity with spatial experimentation, ensuring that the movement of audio signals enhanced rather than distracted from the listening experience. I set ambient sounds as beds and fixed positions while allowing discrete elements like bird chirps to move freely as objects around the listener. In conclusion, spatial audio has evolved from prehistoric acoustic awareness to cutting-edge technologies that are transforming how we consume and experience sound. As we look to the future, continuing innovations in AI and specialized venues like the Sphere suggest that spatial audio will continue to push boundaries and redefine our auditory experiences in increasingly immersive ways. Thank you.
Good evening. So this is the music section of the music technology capstone presentations. Yeah. So paper sessions, of course, we did the first set of those just a couple of hours ago. Tomorrow morning at 11, from 11 to 12:30, we'll do the second set of paper sessions. And tomorrow at 1:30 to about 4 o'clock, there'll be demonstrations in this space. These tables will have work that students have created over the semester, various hardware, software projects, and other sorts of research endeavors that they've put together over the semester. But now we'll listen to some of the creative work that was accomplished over the semester, starting with Brendan and drum set and his self-made triggers. I guess you can't take them off to show anyone, huh? So that was Lone Ascension by Joshua Lin. Next, we'll hear two pieces by Joshua Tuckner, Freefall and Melt.
Take me far away from here. Can you make me forget all my fears? My faith is messing off. The wax is dripping on the floor. My eyes go past my jaw. Nothing's real anymore. Way out, I think I'm spacebound. Stars in my face now, they never stay around. Stuck in their gaze now, wish I did it all alone. dripping on the floor. My eyes go past my jaw. Nothing's real anymore. I've been seeing flashing colors, violet summers, playing tricks in my head. I gotta take a breath. Azure, tunnel, neon, jungle. How did I enter here? What if I disappear?
Next is Simon Segar. Tell me. This is Katrina Sheik. Forgot the name of your piece. Oh yeah, gravitational waves, sonification. Sonification of gravitational waves. And next we have Max Bateman. Where am I here? Prototype and Pythagorean.
Cash is adding up, dough be taking shape. Love is in a triangle, got two lives and a minuum. Stars hang up in space, and this harmony's my lithium. Plus I came before, you know that zero's the pretense for them. People that come after, yeah, I'm sure you'll be more into them. I could like Pythagoras, come sit in my quadrivium. Trivium, 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 trivium.
Okay, this guy is a real zero, that's true.
I sit up late at night, lost 'cause I'm the prototype. Thoughts of what I should have been, shake me just like a poltergeist. I'm screaming at the ceiling to someone I don't believe in. And he replies, it's gambling time, let's roll the dice again. Here's to another year of being a clone. If I act like him, will I still be alone? Sorry bro, did I say that right? I got no idea, I'm the prototype. We act so damn similar, I thought you were the best of me. Glasses of the rosé, I couldn't see the rest of me.
But zero here, to love and right. That's what goes inside our bed when I've been strange at night.
Place, black light, place, slow down. Look behind the mask to realize
there's nothing in there.
I am not a bandit, I'm a rip-off and that's so fair. High and dry, didn't call me right.
Everything is simply a shape, a form, an identifier to let others recognize me as me. But then, what am I? Is this me? My true self? My fake self? What is it that I am? Who are you? Nobody understands me!
I sit up late at night, lost 'cause I'm the prototype. Lost to what I should have been, shake me just like a poltergeist. I'm screaming at the ceiling, this is the one I don't believe in. And he replies,
This is gambling time.
let's roll the dice, another one. Here's to another year of being a clone. If I act like him, will I still be alone? Sorry bro, did I say that right? I got no idea, I'm the prototype.
So this guy is a total loser? Well, let me tell you the story of another loser.
I mustn't run away. I mustn't run away. I mustn't run away. I mustn't run away.
I'm in Unit 0, keep a shield up for my mother. She's an angel and a devil all in one. She's been banging her head against the window. She's just begging me to suffer. Doesn't realize she's snuffing out the sun because she's living undercover. Then Papa popped her over like a capsule. She turned up the heat, yeah, she made sure his fucking hands burn. I just sat around and got familiar with disaster. As we made it fall apart, I truly thought I was the only answer. I think I'll run away, I just want to escape. I'm begging, run away, I think I'll run away. I just wanna escape, I just wanna escape. I think I'll run away, I just wanna escape. I think I'll run away, I just wanna escape. I think I'll run away.
I just wanna escape. I just wanna.
I sit up late at night, lost 'cause I'm the prototype. Off to what I should have been, shake me just like a poltergeist. I'm screaming at the ceiling, this is one I don't believe in. And he replied, it's gambling time, let's roll the dice, yeah, fucking right. This is the last year you'll be seeing a clone. If I live like him, yeah, I'll still be alone. I'm sorry bro, did I say that right? I got no idea, I'm the prototype. Here's to another year of being a clone. If I act like him, will I still be alone? I'm sorry ma, did I say that right? I got no idea, I'm the prototype.
To get out of that posture of dependency into one of self-responsibility requires a death and resurrection.
Do you understand the mantis? Would you feed yourself to another if it meant you would die?
Live for me, call for me, die for me, crawl for me. Is this love? Fall for me, either way, all for me.
Zero, step up in the triangle, viral, wax up on the vinyl. You in my dreams dance with me in Fibonacci spirals. These days I've been flying off the handle. Animal, animal, animal.
I wake up dehydrated in my parents' basement. Stars won't last forever, I feel low, I need to face it. You've been here forever, feels like nothing that could change it. Let you reach into my all your grip, I can't escape it. But fuck it, I don't wanna. I got LUV for you like Madonna, Madonna. Me and you in Castro, yeah, I watch you eat my commas. You spit up on my mama. Maybe she'd be happier if I sang with more drama. I gotta call, you gotta hear. Sounds less like a prayer, more like a cheer. The points I connect in pictures unclear. And my heart and drum is beating. Come on, boy, feed the demon. And the cage is shaking, creaking. My nose is bleeding, bleeding. And my heart and drum is beating. My nose is bleeding, bleeding. But I'm finally breaking even. Zero, come back to the triangle. I could synthesize a life for you, you know I'm vital. Just feed all your dreams to me, I'll play you like the recital. Sit back and relax with me, yeah, I want you idle, idle. You gotta call, you gotta hear. Sounds less like a prayer, more like a dream. I can connect in pictures unclear. Can't write all things, not like a dream. Demon, trapped you in my triangle. Think I'll write a song about you, stuff you on the vinyl. You hear me endlessly, a Fibonacci spiral. These days I'm taking my damn time. Mankind, mankind, mankind.
The conditions of the environment match the readiness of the hero. The adventure that he's ready for is the one that he gets.
Okay, the program continues with Oscar von Rakowski's Head Rush and Bittersweet.
Old days when one roll was enough. Ways to cope, told a joke, moved on to the next phase. Stuck in the wax, now I'm starting a little Wayne. Crabs in a bucket, all these crabs like still tray. Oh, start to narrow like a goyle in the summertime. Growing in the green brown soil like a colored eyes. Gonna thug it out, lost my baby, only double slime. One of a kind and I can't find another rhyme. Morning dew don't sparkle quite like you used to when your light shone through every crack in that dirt shack. Somehow until my flower bloomed. Sunsets look great without you. In one breath spent too much, it's true. Time I could have used to move on, but I'm still waiting on a chance, never coming my way now. There's no going back on what you say now. Spending new seconds on 3 years grayed out. Stand up too quick, head rush, lay down. Seasons change but my leaves stay brown. Still getting strung out in the same lane time. Seeing way too much but played out. I'm a demigod of the Lotus, praying now. Actually looking for a beacon on a Cape Sound. We won't make it out the water, no trace found. Do you know if all the waves go way down? I'll be happy on solid state ground. Said it gets better than the place we stay bound. Still wrapped up in the stars, no space count. Everybody gives me take on change now. I'll be sure to send a survey around. Smell of leather jackets in the spring brings pain now. Once I get a whiff to my brain, it's a breakdown. Autumn built a column of clay and walls lay around. Winter rain was kicking, threatening to make a grave now. Red sun rising, fate and flame crown. Guess I'd rather burn down than fade out. Not all dogs make greyhounds. Just my last song, make the bass loud.
I gotta give it a rest. Why I'm not coming around? I'm trying to rip off your tech, but I can't figure it out.
Put to the stew, I got no stress. My eggs in the basket. Do this shit for fun, but it's also a passion. Subtract the negativity and let it breathe.
Drop the stems to me, I'll mix
the bee will feed you like a plant in the sun. Take you to a place where it's nothing but fun.
This is why we're never around. What are we supposed to do now that we're home? It seems like I won't make a sound. I think I'm really dreaming. It's all bittersweet to me now. You wouldn't want this for me. I thought I promised you'd hear it. I lost the
as fuck, I don't give a fuck. 3 cups of coffee, I'm Marlboro dreaming. Delayed gratification, I try to be patient. I never wanna be caught in complacent. I'm waiting at the door that goes down to the basement. I heard you got the rolling 068, that's a Grayson. We can hit record, I'm not planning for placement. I'm trying to tell you, this is why we're never around. What are we supposed to do now that we're home? It seems like I won't make a sound. I think I'm really dreaming. It's all bittersweet to me now. You wouldn't want this for me. I've been fucking around. Well, how you like finding out? I heard that 3 was a crowd, but I'm still tripping. I grab a song when I'm down. No clue how long it's been out. I've just been trying it out, 'cause I got sick of.
Okay, and next we have Tynan Reynolds, 2 songs, Halifax and Johnny.
Trying to make it to Halifax. Give me some time and I'll be back. Little baby brother Bobby got sacked. He says he's taking all his things and I'll be out for 6 back. Peace be with you and your spirit. Father, I forgot the lyric. All your fleeting intimations give me no reason to fear. With you and your spirit. Father, I forgot the lyric. All your fleeting intimations give me no reason to fear. I'm afraid your city is dead. And I watch you take your things to bed. Little baby with his car got wrecked. I don't remember how it happened, but it ate up all my chest. Peace be with you and your spirit. But I forgot the lyric. All your fleeting intimations give me no reason to fear. With you and your spirit. But I forgot the lyric. All your fleeting intimations give me no reason to fear.
Johnny can't swim cause his parents always said he's an out. So we took him to the levee and we took him to meet Man Ruff. She said, give me your ley lines, Johnny, I'll tell you about what's in store. Well, Johnny wouldn't sink, but my brother made me call his bluff. So we wrapped up in a blanket and we threw him in the back of the truck. I said, ship it till you're dry, Johnny. After that, I don't want to hear a peep out of you. Couldn't let the kid shake us off. He said, "Ah, hey you," and that was the last that we ever saw of him, I think. She said, "Give me all your ley lines, Johnny. What's wrong? It seemed like you were in love." Oh, you knew it was me, Johnny. Deep down, I know you got your hopes up. She said, "Give me all your ley lines, Johnny. I'll tell you about what's in store." Such a lovely day. Despite your anal formalities, a total utter lack of a say. Well, Johnny, you've been great, and I know I'll be okay. With a presence so suffocating, fuck, feels like I could scream. Well, I don't know what to say. You can't stay. I'll be happy to write up the list of things that you can do. Well, I don't know what to say, but I know that you can't stay. You can come, you can go, you can leave, but you can't stay.
Jake Everard and Convergence. So this is the last work on the program tonight, but if you're interested in seeing the gear that's up here and how it's configured, please feel free to come up and take a look around.